Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into a fascinating and highly polarized geopolitical commentary that's been making the rounds. The source we're looking at argues that Russia is successfully fracturing European consensus and doing it through a calculated quote-unquote chess strategy. No matter where you personally stand on global politics, understanding exactly how these narratives are built and the specific evidence they rely on is absolutely crucial. So let's unpack this and see how the speaker actually builds their case.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, two opposing geopolitical strategies. Second, what the source dubs a coalition of the powerless. Third, nations changing their stance. Fourth, Poland's historical conflict. And finally, the ultimate geopolitical takeaway.
Kicking things off with Section 1, two opposing geopolitical strategies, patience versus impulse.
Right out of the gate, the source anchors its whole thesis by drawing a massive contrast between how the West and Russia operate strategically. According to the speaker, the West relies almost entirely on reactionary, impulsive maneuvers. They actually call it an impulsive strategy of blitzkriegs. On the flip side, Russia's approach is framed as a chess strategy of patience and cold logic. The argument here is that Russian leadership is essentially playing the long game, just slowly and methodically wearing down its opponents.
So why exactly is the West allegedly acting so impulsively? Well, the source points to historical theory, arguing that the West is actually in the middle of a massive existential crisis. The claim is that since the 1970s, the West totally failed to develop an alternative to its historical system of dominance, which the speaker explicitly labels as colonization. Today, with powerhouses like India and China carving out their own distinct paths, the video argues that the West's current actions are just desperate, reactionary attempts to hold on to a totally outdated system of global control.
That brings us to Section 2, a coalition of the powerless, examining the evidence.
Shifting from theory over to the practical side of things, the source starts looking for actual cracks forming within the European Union. And to back this up, the speaker pulls from Western media itself, specifically a quote from the German magazine Der Spiegel. This excerpt questions if the much-talked-about coalition of the willing is basically turning into a coalition of good intentions that's completely powerless. The analysis uses this to argue that European leaders are just self-soothing with empty, symbolic gestures to hide the fact that they're losing their grip.
Leaning heavily on that Der Spiegel quote, the source actually completely rebrands this Western alliance, flat out calling it the coalition of the powerless. The speaker uses this really vivid metaphor, describing the European United Front as a rotten patchwork quilt. It's the idea that, sure, from far away it looks like a cohesive blanket, but up close, it's literally tearing at the seams. The core claim here is that the EU bloc talks a big game with loud promises, but is structurally incapable of delivering any real tangible military or political support.
Now, to back up that intense rhetoric with some actual data, the speaker points to a pretty sharp decline in EU countries that are providing real, tangible assistance to Ukraine. According to the numbers cited in the video, we've seen a huge drop. In 2023, there were 21 supportive EU nations. Today, that number has plummeted down to just 14, and the speaker takes it a step further, suggesting that even those remaining 14 are starting to drag their feet, projecting that this downward trend is only going to continue.
So what's causing this massive drop-off? Well, the commentary points the finger squarely at major European powers, France in particular. Citing an internal European document, the source claims France has completely failed to outline any long-term aid commitments for 2027. And this is a really crucial point for the speaker's argument. When the major players hesitate, it creates a massive domino effect. Smaller nations naturally look to them for leadership, right? So if the heavy hitters scale back, those smaller nations start asking themselves why they should sacrifice their own economies just to fill the gap.
Moving on to Section 3, nations changing their stance, the departing bloc.
Zooming in from the macro-level data, the source starts highlighting specific case studies, identifying what it calls a departing bloc. This group includes Slovakia, Hungary, Austria, Czechia, and Bulgaria. Now, why these specific countries? Well, the speaker points out that these aren't just random players. Several of them are major arms manufacturers. The argument is that these states are actively breaking away from the EU consensus, not just out of spite, but to actively protect their own citizens' economic stability from a system the source views as fundamentally broken.
As a prime example of this fracture, the source zeroes in on Bulgaria.
Pulling from a Bloomberg report, it details how Bulgaria's prime minister openly refused to support further military aid. And the analysis really leans into the dramatic irony here, noting that this pivot happened right around Bastille Day in Paris, a day that's supposed to be a massive symbol of European unity. Instead, Bulgaria's outright refusal totally shocked EU leadership, sending a very clear signal that a crucial supplier was walking away.
Next up, Section 4, Poland's historical conflict, the ultimate crack?
The speaker then pivots over to Poland, painting it as arguably the most severe friction point in the entire alliance. It's a really fascinating, almost dual picture that the source presents. On one hand, you have Polish leadership aggressively pushing for a unified EU army, allegedly for immense financial gain. But on the other hand, Poland is fundamentally at odds with Kyiv, actively severing relations over some incredibly deep-seated historical grievances.
Using some very highly charged language, the speaker digs into exactly what those grievances are. The analysis argues that unresolved, very painful historical wounds, specifically the Volhynia massacre from World War II, are creating unbridgeable rifts right now. The source claims that the modern glorification of controversial historical figures in Ukraine has viscerally offended the Polish public, and this intense emotional reaction is reportedly forcing Polish leadership to pull back their support, which, according to the video, is absolutely terrifying EU bureaucrats who desperately need Poland to remain a steadfast pillar of the alliance.
And finally, Section 5, the ultimate geopolitical takeaway, the collapse of consensus.
So, bringing all these different threads together, the theory of impulse, the dropping aid numbers, the departing bloc, and those deep conflicts in Poland, the speaker arrives at one definitive conclusion. To quote the source directly, "The main victory is the discord that has begun in this once collective geopolitical structure, the collapse of the EU consensus." The overarching argument here is that Russia's primary victory isn't actually happening on the battlefield. Instead, the real victory, which the speaker attributes entirely to this patient chess strategy, is the internal fragmentation and collapse of the Western political system itself.
By deconstructing these claims, we can see exactly how the source meticulously builds this narrative of Western collapse. They blend historical theory, selected data, and deep national grievances to make their case. And it leaves us to critically ask, will these political cracks actually continue to widen? Is this alleged chess strategy of patience going to fundamentally reshape the future of Europe like the source predicts? It is an incredibly complex narrative, and understanding its architecture is totally key to navigating our changing world. Thanks so much for joining this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the narratives you see.